Hail, and welcome back to my channel. So as promised in my last video, this video is about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. Why is that so? Because this is the topic that originally got me interested into the occult, into the metaphysical, into the paranormal, if you will. And it is just something that has been, still is, and probably forever will remain very fascinating to me. Because, again, it is something that I have personally had a lot of experience with throughout my life, not just in myself, but with others that I, help deal with this particular topic. After I, learned how to deal with this myself. Now, today we are not going to be discussing we're not going to be discussing how exactly to deal with this particular topic. However, we are going to be discussing how to recognize that this topic is of import, of relevance in your particular situation. Now, what is this topic? As the title shows, the title of the video is How Do I Know That I Am Haunted? Now, this is something that is, of course, going to perhaps draw a bit more of a mainstream audience, and that is in no way, shape, or form meant to be offensive. It is merely meant to be saying that I will expound, elaborate a little bit on certain things. If you are someone who normally does not watch my channel is normally dedicated to magic, that is with CK at the end, not stage magic, as in tricks, sleights of hand, stuff like that. I am, of course, talking about magic as in the actual practice of energy manipulation in various ways through the application of spells, through the utilization of divination, and that sort of thing. So I am someone who walks a shamanic path. I am someone who works with spirits on a daily basis as a result of my, well, practices, I suppose. I'm someone who specializes in specifically protection magic and, well, magic that deals with the spiritual warfare scenarios, I suppose we will call it, for lack of a better term, and to keep it a little bit lightweight rather than go full in into that particular topic. So that's not what this is about. To this end, I deal with spirits that are harassing people. I deal with magic, with magicians who are just out to ruin the lives of other people and things like that. Now, in my line of work, because that's basically what I've come to call it, my line of work, I have encountered spirits who are both positive, who are neutral, who are negative. I have encountered magicians, as in magic users, as in people who practice magic, people who practice spells. We will refer to them as magicians, regardless of whether they are shamans, whether they are witches, whether they are, ceremonial magicians. The varieties are endless. So, I mean, someone technically who is an exorcist for the Catholic Church, in my definition, they are magicians, because the definition of magic is the affecting of reality, yourself, everything around you through the application of will and energy. And of course, when you perform an exorcism, that is what happens. Your will is pitted against a perceived negative spirit that you are casting out through the utilization of your deity or deities in question to facilitate a removal of a particular negative entity. So to that end, I will be beginning this video because it is something that I actually feel is a very good complementary video to my other video, How Do I Know That I've Been Cursed? In fact, many times the two interact with each other, these two topics. The topic of cursing is very closely tied, surprisingly, or perhaps not so surprisingly if you have a bit more understanding and knowledge of this topic, because a lot of curses utilize spirits in order to facilitate their negative effects. Now, it's not always the case. Some curses, of course, just use energy, disrupting the energy field of another individual. But a lot of the time, in order to continue cursing someone, it is often handy, if you will, to utilize a negative spirit or a spirit who is out to do harm to another on your behalf because you either paid them or because of some other grudge that that spirit may hold against that particular person that you may have struck a bargain with, I suppose, in order to disrupt their life, their energy, etc. So a lot of the time when somebody is haunted, it is possible, I should say, not a lot of the time. So it is sometimes possible that someone who is haunted or a location that is haunted may in fact also be cursed because of the aforementioned reasons. So these topics tie in very closely together for that particular person. Now, that is to make a very clear distinction here. Someone who is cursed is not necessarily haunted, but someone who is haunted is also not necessarily cursed, but the two can be related to each other. So, with that out of the way, I would like to discuss hauntings in general. So, what exactly is a haunting? And after that, we will be going into the how do I know that this is in fact the case for me. A haunting is what I call an active manifestation of a spirit or spirits or entities. First, I would like to outline a couple of definitions here. When I say an active manifestation, I refer to that in that sense for a very specific purpose, because as a person who is a shaman who walks the shamanic path that I walk, who interacts with spirits on a daily basis. I am what you would refer to, I suppose, as a pantheistic animist. I'm also a pagan. I walk the eclectic path, which means that I work with deities pretty much from the world over, from various different pantheons. I've worked with Hindus, with the Celts, with Africans on occasion, with Asian deities from a variety of regions. I've worked with Native American spirits here and there, but my primary focus as someone who was born and raised in the Netherlands, in Europe, for those of you who are American who may not have exact knowledge of the geography of things. The Netherlands is a Germanic country. Holland is also another name that my country goes by. I currently live in the United States. But yeah, so I walk the Germanic path mostly. That is the gods that I work with most, which means that Odin, Thor, Freya, Frey, Balder, etc., etc. These are the main deities that I work with, although in the more Germanic regions of the world, which are not Scandinavian, we tend to refer to them as by other names. Donar is Thor, Wodan is Odin, etc. So just to clarify that, I am coming at this from a very different perspective. If you are someone who has an Abrahamic background, Judaism, Christianity in its various forms, Islam in its various forms. I do not believe that Yahweh or Jehovah is the Almighty God. Just to also get that out of the way, I believe He exists. I believe that He has influence in this world due to the amount of followers He has. I do, however, not think He's a very nice guy. I have to be honest with you. If you have browsed through my channel, you'll probably see some videos that I have made on that particular topic. But basically, what I am getting at here is the understanding that I have of the spirit world is a little different from what many of you may believe. But I also believe, therefore, because everybody has a spirit, which is where the animistic part comes in, and the pantheistic part, of course, means that everything is a part of God. Everything is, which I refer to as the source or the divine creator or the supreme creator, which I believe is a seem-like conscious, genderless, all-encompassing being, energy, I guess, that is frankly beyond my comprehension. I have no interest in delving into that in this video for obvious reasons because it's so far off topic, so far out there, that this video would literally be way longer than it needs to be, and it is frankly a topic all on its own. But regardless, everything is connected. Everything has a spirit in my worldview, in my experience, in the way I work. That is also utilized. That is why I'm also eclectic. That's why I do not refrain from, working with other pagan deities from other pantheons because I believe that, we all resonate with somebody, and some people we do not resonate with. For example, despite my background as an ex-Christian, I was a Jehovah's Witness at one point. I do not believe that the Christian deity is very benevolent. I know a lot of people will not like hearing that, but I have my reasons, which I have outlined in various other videos on this channel. If you have an interest in that, by all means, please do check them out. However, so I believe that spirits are all around us. That is basically the topic that I want to address here in terms of the active manifestation definition. So when I say active manifestation, spirits are all around us, all the time, everywhere. This might creep some people out, but it is just true. I mean, the dead outnumber the living. If you count all sorts of different spirits from different species, if you count spirits from the different humanoid species like the Fae or elves or Ulvar, as we call them in Germanic tradition, the Dvergar or the dwarves, angelic beings, people would traditionally refer to as demonic beings. I personally refer to those as negative entities or negative beings because, again, due to the association with Christianity, a lot of pagan deities who are not demons in my book have been labeled as demons, to vilify them, if you will, by the Abrahamic traditions. So a lot of magicians will, probably refer to the beings that they work with as demons, but a lot of those demons will not actually be my definition of demons. So that's another thing that I would like to outline here when I speak of demons. I am specifically talking about negative entities. And when I say negative entities, I am specifically referring to beings who are out to cause one harm. And that is not, of course, necessarily the case with most pagan deities. In my experience, I work with them. Most of them are perfectly fine individuals. Some of them may be more honest. Some of them are more rough around the edges. Some of them are more prone to pushing the practitioner for various reasons in various different ways in order to facilitate self growth, in order to facilitate the drive that one has, in order to make changes through magic, through expressing the self and exerting one's will on the world around them. Because that is, of course, part of what magic is about: self development, ascension, empowering the self, reaching a higher state of being, that sort of thing. So, when I say a demon, I am specifically discussing beings who are here to cause you, your loved ones, and or the human race at large harm. Yes, that is a very subjective definition. I say that in many different videos in which I discuss this topic, because of course there are conflicts of species. I mean, you have hunters and you have predators and prey in nature, of course. Would we call those beings demons? I suppose from the perspective of a prey, the predator might be seen as a demon because it is somebody that is actively out to cause you harm without any regard for your well-being, without any empathy, without any, feelings of goodwill towards you. So this, of course, includes astral parasites. Those I would refer to as demons. I would refer to beings who are literally out to just mess with you, to cause you harm, to cause you to do negative things, to cause you to do, harmful things to either yourself, to other beings that are around you, your loved ones, perhaps. You hear a lot of stories when you talk about hauntings, where a person, starts hearing voices that tell them to harm another, which is another thing before we continue that I would like to outline. I am a student of psychology. I do believe that there is a very strong place, of course, for secular science. So I will have to also give you that warning if there is a mental issue or physical issue that you are suspecting that you are dealing with. Please do go see a professional that is specialized in that particular area of expertise, who may be able to assist you, because despite the fact that as a shaman that I do believe in the existence of the spirit world, that I very much believe that they can cause harm to the physical and vice versa, that is not to say that everything can magically, quote unquote, be remedied by magic. Magic is used to combat energetic issues, and your health issues may very well be the case of may very well be caused by a magical issue such as a curse or a spirit negatively impacting you, which is something I fully accept and understand and deal with in my line of work again, not as a psychologist, of course, but as a shaman. So that is a thing. However, there is also the physical aspect of things, and that requires treatment all on its own. Um, you are, of course, if you are indeed dealing with an entity, in your right to stand your ground and deal with that on an energetic level. In fact, I would recommend that you remove it if it is indeed the source of it. However, that does not mean that any and all physical symptoms, any and all mental health issues that may have come about um, as a result of this, that they do not need to be treated by a mental health professional, of course. Of course, you cannot tell them that this is caused by spirits or entities because the secular sciences do not accept or currently believe in the existence of a spirit world. So, what I would recommend that you do is if you do indeed suspect that these things are a problem for you, or physical or mental, that you do seek the help of a professional in that area. So, with that out of the way, let us continue with the yeah, with this particular video. My apologies for this very long introduction, but I do always feel the need to outline such things, especially if I believe that a video is going to attract a bit more mainstream attention from people who may not be as well versed in the occult and the metaphysical as my regular viewer base, as respectively small as it is, I suppose. Um, you know, I believe that people would do well to be informed, I suppose, on these particular topics, and that they should take every precaution that is necessary and possible when one is dealing with such things. So, as mentioned, spirits are around us all the time, and these spirits can be from different beings, from species, different humans who live through different time periods, who may, for whatever reason, stick around. Maybe your ancestors. You always have your guides around you. You always have your ancestors, for some of them at least, around you. You have perhaps spirits with whom you have a contract from a past life, because I believe in reincarnation. I have seen plenty of evidence of this in my line of work, which is partially involving the removal of spirit contracts that are no longer wanted. That is another topic entirely. But suffice to say, it is evident to me that there are past lives, future lives, that reincarnation is a thing, and that people sometimes choose to not reincarnate for various reasons, and that some of them stick around as spirits on this plane, on this planet, for whatever reason. And sometimes they just function as protectors, as helpers, and sometimes they function as the complete opposite, which is what this video is mostly going to be about. So you are surrounded by spirits at all the time, but most spirits really have no desire to interact with you in a way that could be classified as a haunting. Because what a haunting is, as I said, an active manifestation of one or more spirits or entities. For now, even though technically an entity and a spirit are two different things in my book, we will refer to these beings for ease of reference as a spirit or spirits for the purpose of this video. Um, so most beings have no interest, most spirits do not have an interest in interacting with human beings. I have briefly discussed these kinds of things in my Ouija board video, which is may also be of interest to you. But what a haunting is the exertion, the active manifestation of a spirit towards a particular location and or person, or perhaps even multiple people. However, it is rare that multiple people are haunted by the same spirit, single spirit, at one given time. It is more common that one sees that a single spirit may inhabit a particular location and that therefore multiple people are harassed by that same spirit. However, if a spirit chooses to haunt a particular individual, it is more than likely that the brunt of the haunting will be borne by the individual that has been chosen as the target or victim, if you will. Now, I am not a fan of the word victim because it implies helplessness and powerlessness that I frankly do not appreciate in my line of work, in my practices. I would never refer to a individual who is haunted as a victim because it is disempowering. Magic is all about will. Therefore, when one deals with energy, when one deals with spirits, which we will be getting into another video in how to rid oneself of these kinds of things, we will be going into how one can utilize will with a capital W to overpower and eventually remove a spirit of such a nature, because you are not a helpless victim, despite what most mainstream religions tell you. Human beings are, at the end of the day, spirits. They are inhabiting a physical body, yes, but you are a spirit. Each spirit has individual strengths and weaknesses, and past life experiences and past life, capabilities that they can tap into on a higher level, on a soul level, on your divine self, your true self. And this is, of course, something that you can utilize to your advantage when one deals with disembodied beings. However, one should not do so recklessly, and we will be discussing the reasons for that later on. Why do spirits haunt? Well, the reason is that there are pretty much an infinite amount of reasons that can be the case. Um, you know, it is possible that spirit is, for example, madly in love with someone, and this person may die, and the spirit will then linger to keep their loved one company, to remain with them, to make sure that they're happy, to make sure that they're protected. And this is, of course, the benevolent version of it. In such a case, I would not describe such a thing as a malicious haunting. I would not describe it as a negative haunting, provided, of course, that the individual that has deceased is someone who lets the currently still incarnated individual live their life as normal. So what you will sometimes see in the case of this, for example, in the case of this kind of scenario, is that, for example, a husband dies and his wife is still among the living, and she will perhaps meet another man down the line, and the husband may become jealous. The spirit of the husband may then start acting out. This can either be a good thing or a bad thing. If the husband is just jealous, of course, this is a bad thing. However, if the husband sees something about this other individual that may potentially be harmful, then the spirit is, of course, acting as a protector in that sense. Because if this other man that is also incarnated might be having a history of abusing his spouses, and the spirit of the husband sees this, that is, of course, that is a very different nuance. Now, one could, of course, argue what business does a spirit have in interacting with someone like that. Yeah, that is a very gray area. I do not believe in the existence of some, you know, karmic point system as such. I don't believe that that is what karma is. Let that also be clear. I do not believe that there is such a thing as universal justice on that scale. I believe that this is a bit of a gray area. I think the universe just is. That is a hard truth for a lot of people to swallow because they like that kind of comfort, but that is again a very different topic for a very different time. So basically, what happens sometimes spirit can cause trouble, and sometimes they don't. Now, what will often also happen, for example, in the instance that a location is haunted, and to start with a more benevolent case, is where a person, like some rich guy, builds a house and then dies. And this man may have become, old and then he dies, but he's so very proud of this house that he's built. And he just, enjoys living in it and he enjoys hanging out around it and he likes observing and watching the people that live there. And so long as this individual does not disrupt the presence of the currently incarnated individuals, whether they be his family or otherwise. This is, of course, not going to be that much of a problem now. 9 times out of 10, you would probably not even realize that this man would be there. However, it is, of course, also possible that somebody, as you often see in, for example, ghost shows, which is what I used to watch way back in the day, of course. Like, I used to watch that a lot because I found it interesting before I took up the arcane arts, shall we say. Um, that was something that very much interested me, and you would often hear stories about some human who would die in a house, and he would be very possessive and jealous, and he would try to chase the tenants away because it was his house. So those are again two different nuances of the same kind of scenario, and that is something that I do want you to keep in mind. Don't ever judge a particular presence harshly because it's there, because like I said, a lot of people think of a haunting as something negative in and of itself, but that does not necessarily have to be the case. Now, like I said, a haunting I define as an active manifestation. That means that when I refer to a haunting as a haunting is when the presence is noted by those that are living. Now, to go back to the example of the homeowner who died and then just observes the people that are currently living in the house that he built, and he's just content to just walk around and sit there, and he doesn't actively show himself to the inhabitants that are currently there. I would not even really necessarily define this as an haunting, because the current homeowners will probably not realize that this individual is there. So when it becomes a problem, when it becomes an actual haunting, aka an active manifestation, and this is going to be without the consent, of course, of the inhabitants, is when this particular individual starts throwing dishes around, or start, knocking on the windows, or keeping the family up at night, or pestering the cat, or poking the dog, or tugging the hair of Mrs. Johnson, or stuff like that. So these are all things that you really do need to keep in mind. The difference there is very hopefully clear. The reasons that there are several other reasons that a spirit may decide to haunt a place. The spirit may be lost. The spirit may be confused. They may be trapped in a sort of limbo, which is what you often hear, where they will relive the moment of their death over and over and over and over again, where they're basically stuck. They may be held hostage by other, usually more malicious spirits. Well, not usually, they are going to be more malicious spirits because they don't respect the free will of others, of course, which is what I partially define as a malicious spirit. Um, it may be that they are, just that they may just want to remain around. They may just want to cause issues in the spiritual realms or in the physical realms. They may just be the kind of being that just likes, souring the lives of others, the existence of others. Um, they may have singled out a particular individual, in the case of an individual haunting, as being a potential vessel for living the rest of the existence that they did not get to have through them. For example, if a woman dies who was in life not a very good person, she may be a very selfish individual, um, and she may see a teenage girl that moves in with her mother and her father and with her brother or something like that. Standard story that you again often hear in these ghost shows, where this woman will seek to utilize the unstable emotions of that particular teenage girl. She will perhaps want to relive her glory days of being young and alive, and wanting to do all the things that she used to do, and she may therefore seek to start working on this particular girl as she is growing up, as she is going through all these hormonal and growth issues that every teenager faces. And of course, a teenager is in a very vulnerable position. Now, to insert here, I have been partially possessed. I have dealt with oppression. I have dealt with possession. I have dealt with infestations in the houses in which I lived. I have dealt with angelic spirits. I have dealt with demonic spirits. I have dealt with various beings, human spirits that I had attached to me at one point, which I will be making probably a separate video on, because that is not really relevant for the topic that we are discussing. How do I know that I am haunted? Well, so to continue, these are all reasons that may be applicable, but what we have mostly discussed, of course, is human spirits. Now, there are, of course, as I said, negative entities, and of course, human spirits can be negative entities. Make no mistakes about that, as I outlined in the last example of the person that seeks to possess another. That is what I would describe as a negative entity, of course. But in the event of non-human discarnate spirits, such as what we would refer to as a demon, which can either be like a fallen angel, if you will, or a some other sort of non-human spirit that decided at some point in its existence that it no longer wanted to be nice to individuals, or maybe they were born or created or came into being that way. because the universe is not perfect. It may sometimes give birth to defects, just like a human may give birth to a serial killer, for example. So that is possible. A spirit may be corrupted from the moment of its inception, and a spirit like that may just be out to feed. Some beings feed off of negative energy. Some beings need it to sustain themselves, to feed it, which is, by their definition, their natural order. Of course, as human beings, we don't like negative energy when it is related to us, when it is affecting us. So, this is something that, from our perspective, from the human perspective, would be seen as a demon. And in my definition, as I outlined it earlier in this video. So, such a being may decide to start fucking with you, may decide to start messing with you in order to facilitate the generation of negative energy. And it may do this by starting issues in your household, by causing fights, by breaking your dishes, by breaking your valuables, by keeping you awake at night, by depriving you of sleep, by doing all sorts of negative, nasty things overtly and covertly. Because make no mistake, a lot of spirits can work very subtly when they want to. It is often, in fact, not in their best interest to be detected. Because what happens if somebody is detected, then they are more likely to be addressed. If somebody is more likely to be addressed, that obviously disrupts the generation of their food, or in essence, what amounts to their food. Spirit is energy, everything is energy. Spirits feed off of energy. Therefore, they grow stronger the more energy they have. So they can build for themselves in the right environment, if it is a negative entity, a kind of, well, a little empire for themselves. And usually, what will happen is if the spirit becomes strong enough, that it will attract other, initially weaker spirits who are like it, and who will then start to help building this little empire, this little base of operations, this feeding ground, if you will. And it will grow exponentially, and things will become worse. And from there on, it will spread out like a cancer. And oftentimes, you see this in houses in which a violent death has occurred, or a place where a violent death has occurred. You will often see this in the case of traumatic deaths. You will see this in the case of sites that harbor a lot of negative energy. For example, you will see it in graveyards, areas with a lot of crime. You will see it in churches and other kinds of holy buildings. Now, why do I say that? Again, if you come from an Abrahamic background, as I have outlined, I'm not the biggest fan of the Abrahamic religion, shall we say. But the reason that I say this is because even if you are of the firm conviction that your way is the right way, which, with all due respect, fair enough, you are allowed to, of course, believe and think what you want. But what I would like you to think about in this scenario is think about how much death, how much grief, how much sadness, how much you know energy generated by abuse, how much energy generated by all sorts of negative sadness that people bring to places such as churches. They go there, they hold funerals, they pray for sad people, they pray for depressed people, for people who are suicidal. Maybe they themselves are trying to quote unquote find God to, because they are living a miserable existence, because they're living sad, depressed, empty lives, because they have a lot of negativity in their lives. That is often the reason why people turn to religion, of course, because it is for comfort, which is perfectly understandable, which is perfectly, well, human, really. And this is, of course, something that generates and brings with it a lot of negative energy. So, what happens now, of course, a church will often be kept free from such beings by the servants of the particular deity that presides over the church or other sacred site, because they, for example, if you go to a Hindu temple, the same thing will probably happen. It's a different deity that presides over it, depending on who the temple is dedicated to, of course. But spirits will be employed by that particular deity to keep that site clean from, invaders and intruders. And the same goes for churches, mosques, etc. So it will usually be kept in check and at bay in such places, but it is still very much possible that such negative energy will be affecting people in that building. You often hear from people that they find churches, for example, very creepy places, and that is part of the reason why they will feel that way, because there do linger a lot of negative entities, or at least a lot of negative energies, excuse me, that will, you know, leave an impression or an imprint on that particular building. And that brings me then to the next kind of haunting rather than a conscious spirit, which is what they call a quote unquote residual haunting. Now, something that appears to be a residual haunting may not necessarily be that way, because, like I said, sometimes a spirit is just trapped in its own little limbo and it experiences its own little hell, basically, over and over and over and over and over again. In that case, it may appear to be a residual haunting, but it may, in fact, not be a residual haunting because of the fact that it keeps just repeating itself, because it is, in some very strange way, kind of a neurotic thing. And this is actually something that you see a lot with spirits who become a little deranged. They will often exhibit very ritualistic, neurotic behaviors. So that is something to look out for. But basically, a residual haunting is, if you are all somewhat familiar with this topic, of course, an energetic imprint or an impression on a specific environment, where it is basically like a movie or a video clip or a sound clip, depending on how the residual energy expresses itself, that plays over and over and over at a usually particular time and day, and stuff like that. Where it's, for example, if you have a spirit of a man who was murdered at 2 a.m. at night, and this man will then appear to get murdered. Blood curdling screams every night at 2 a.m. hearable in that same house, in that particular room, or through that particular house. And this will repeat over and over every time at that exact same time. Now, the difference between how you can tell the difference between a residual haunting and an actual haunting is that once you start engaging with it, you will find that if it is reactive, that you are likely dealing with a spirit. Now, I do not recommend that you mindlessly go provoking spirit. We will deal with that in a different video or a different time, because this is just to discuss how to tell the symptoms, how to know how, if, and when you are indeed dealing with a haunting. But there are ways in which you can deal with this. So, a residual haunting will not react to that kind of thing. It will merely just play over and over. And no matter what you do, no matter how much you try to provoke a reaction from it, no matter how much you try to contact it or converse with it, it will not respond. That is how you will know that it is a residual haunting. Now, if you are a bit more gifted in terms of your extrasensory perceptions, clairvoyant, clairaudient, having the abilities of an empath, etc., clairsentience, you will usually be able to feel, hear, or in some other way, shape, or form detect a consciousness behind a haunting. And if there is no consciousness behind a haunting, unless of course the spirit is very good at cloaking or masking itself, because that is a thing. In magic, we have in various different workings the world over a lot of invisibility spells, for example. It is very much possible for spirits to, in the astral plane, on the spiritual levels, to cloak itself to prevent it from being detected. That is one caveat that you have to realize when you are dealing with a phenomenon like this, where it is basically just possible for it to masquerade as a residual haunting rather than a actual conscious entity or being. And again, it is in the best interest usually of a spirit, unless it is particularly feeding off of this kind of energy, that it needs attention, that it needs fear and provocation to feed off of, because it may depend on the spirit that what kind of energy that they prefer. Usually, you will have a very boisterous, outwardly expressive, assertive, dominant spirit, will want to subjugate the inhabitants of a household if they are haunting a location where a more subtle individual who is just interested in feeding off of negative energy, period, it will want to more behind the scenes manipulate things. And this is often what you will see with attachments to a particular person, where they will subtly negatively influence the individual, maybe work their energy behind the scenes on the individual to break them down over time to make them right for either possession, suicide, or some other negative occurrence for the individual involved. So these are a few things to keep in mind. So in short, what a haunting is, it can be used to describe pretty much a active manifestation, an outward expression that is noticeable by others than the spirit itself, such as a family or a particular individual that lives somewhere or that is followed by a spirit that notices that there is something off about the environment, that is there's something off about their energy in the case of a particular individual being targeted, etc. So, what are the symptoms and the signs of hauntings? We have already briefly through the last segment that we discussed this. However, there are so many ways that you can identify a haunting. It really does depend on the kind of individual that the spirit is. It does really depend on how they are exerting themselves. And it also does get a little trickier because it does depend on whether the person is haunted or whether a location is haunted. So I will first, therefore, divide it up, and we will first be discussing a haunting of a particular location, and then we will move on to the haunting of a person. What I will say in advance is usually the haunting of a location is going to be much more overt and easy to detect. Because if a single individual is targeted, it can be chalked up to mental illness. It can be chalked up to just the person, being depressed or being suicidal, which are of course natural phenomenon because your life may be shit. You may just have had a massive breakup with who you thought was the love of your life, or you may just have lost your job in your house, and such people can of course genuinely become cripplingly depressed or even suicidal. That is possible. There does not have to be a spirit involved necessarily for this to happen. So that is something that is a little harder to detect in people who are haunted by a spirit rather than a location. Now, oftentimes, of course, to continue haunting for a location, will have multiple people, if there are multiple people living in the location, who will report strange occurrences. Now, initially, when you enter a haunted location, it is very unlikely that you will immediately start hearing voices. It is very unlikely that you will immediately start seeing shadows out of the corner of your eye. It is very unlikely that they will immediately start moving objects for you. And the reason for this is if there is an intelligent cognitive haunting behind it, is that they will want to probe you, they will want to test you out, they will want to observe you and see who you are, what you react to, what will generate the most energy out of you, and what will get your attention most. Now, of course, and this is something that I forgot to mention earlier, in the case that a haunting is not malicious, a haunting may still be present, but in that case, it may be because the spirit in question may want to have your help to perhaps cross over, to perhaps rectify something that they feel has been done to them as an injustice. Perhaps there is, you hear that in ghost shows a lot where there's like a object buried in the basement or on the attic, you know, and they will want to help you. They will want to help you find it so that you can set the record straight on something that happened. Maybe they were murdered and buried in the basement, or maybe had like some sort of letters that were, hidden on the attic. One example comes to mind where they just, you know, they basically just want to rectify things. These are quote unquote benevolent hauntings, but they will want to make themselves known for various reasons. And of course, as a person who likely has never experienced something along those lines, it will initially perhaps strike you as being malicious. It will perhaps strike you as being violating of your privacy, which it is because it is in your mind your house. It is supposed to be your sanctuary. It is supposed to be your safe haven. Um, and that is a very touchy subject because on one hand you would say it's my house, I purchased it, I paid for it. The person that was here no longer has a claim to it because they are now dead and they should move on. And I respect and understand that side of the argument, of course. Like I said, I have dealt with hauntings and infestations in my own house, and it is very violent. I have lived in houses where I never felt alone, where even in my bedroom I would feel watched constantly, and I would feel observed and violated, and just you want to do certain things in the privacy of your bedroom, which require you to feel like you're having privacy and stuff like that. I mean, you don't want to have people watch you have sex. You don't want to have people look at you looking at porn. You don't want to have people looking at you taking a dump. You don't want to have people looking at you taking a shower. Uh, you know, it's violating. You don't want to be looked at while you sleep. It's an infringement of a very basic human need of privacy for very normal human things that people just need or really want to do in their lives. So, and not just that. I mean, even private things that you discuss in the privacy of your own home, your love life, your finances, your internal squabbles and issues. These are all things that should remain within the group in which they are relevant and not be listened into by some random disembodied stranger. So most spirits will respect that, by the way. Even though I said earlier in the video that, of course, spirits are around you all the time, but most spirits do genuinely understand that, you will want to be alone and have your own privacy. I don't really think that in most cases that you need to worry about that because I work with a lot of spirits. There are a lot of spirits in my house that I voluntarily let stay here because I enlisted them to, assist me with certain things. But that is, and by enlist, that is voluntarily, by the way. I basically hired them, not so much enslaving them because that is not ethical in my book, just to clarify that. Basically, a haunting can be of a location can be either malicious or benign. The first thing that you will want to do is identify which is which, and that will likely become clear over time. But to go back to the very beginning, suppose that you are browsing a house. You're just browsing houses. You're going there with perhaps your spouse and or your entire family. You're looking at houses. You're considering buying a new home or renting a new home, and you will enter a place outside. It will feel perfectly fine, or maybe you will look at the house and you will get a very strange, ominous feeling or a very weird feeling that is very hard to pinpoint. Now, what that is your intuition at work. I would recommend that you do not ignore that. However, not everybody has an intuition that is that honed, and even if they do, people will sometimes ignore it, or perhaps because the house is a great bargain. Perhaps a house is very cheap in rent, and you need to move urgently for whatever reason. Perhaps you have a family expansion. Maybe you have a child on the way, and you need to find a place quickly because your old place is not big enough anymore, etc., etc. There are so many reasons that a person ignores their intuition if they have a developed intuition or a developed enough intuition, I should say, to detect such a thing. But if you can, and please do be alert, don't ever ignore those kinds of warning signs from your intuition because it's there for a reason, because it detects something that is not quite right. So, what will happen is you will go into that place and you will continue having that feeling. And the moment that you actually step inside of it is when it probably will start slowly hitting you. Now, again, you can be distracted, but oftentimes, independently, what you will hear is from various people. They will have strange feelings of perhaps being watched, of being observed, perhaps a creepy feeling, an uneasy feeling. They will sometimes have feelings that are what we call in psychology ego dystonic, which means outside the ego, outside the self. What that means is that, especially initially, when one is not affected by a spirit specifically, and we will go more into that later. Um, when I say ego dystonic, again, like I said, it means outside the person, which means that it is very clearly recognizable that a feeling is very foreign to you. Suppose that you are, just a person who doesn't have that much issues in their life at that present moment, and you just, browse your house, your potential new house, and you just go in there and you find yourself thinking, oh yeah, this is a nice house, it looks great, great rooms, nice size, blah blah blah, and all of a sudden you will get hit with this very strange feeling of sadness, or you will get hit with a very malicious, evil feeling out of nowhere. You will feel perhaps rage or anger or hostility, and you don't know where it comes from. It may seem like it comes from within you, but at the same time, you will likely be able to differentiate, like, huh, why am I feeling this way? Because there is no, you know, conceivable trigger for it at first glance. That is one of the very first early warning signs that a place could potentially be haunted. Now, of course, it could also be that the energy in the house is merely residual, and that gives off this kind of place. Now, that is, of course, easier to deal with, in which case I simply would recommend, if that is indeed the case, that you just cleanse your house, whether that is through white sage, through smudging, through performing perhaps cleansing rituals, cleansing rites, cleansing spells, if you are a magician who's skilled in such kind of things. Perhaps you will want to just, clean up the place, make it nice, and basically replace the negative energy after a good cleanse with positive. If it is just a issue of lingering negative energy, then there should not be that much of an issue. However, how are you going to tell that in the span of an hour or so when you are shown around? It's very hard to tell that. You would literally have to sit down in a room with the realtor there, um, and meditate and or maybe do something else, or however you communicate if you are in some way, shape, or form gifted with things to such a point that you have them developed enough that you can do those things. Because everybody has gifts, in my understanding of the spiritual. So basically, you will have to figure out which is which. And what may happen, and you do hear this, is that people may get touched. What you do have hear is that people may hear voices. They may hear their name being called by what, for example, if a guy is in a room and he hears his wife calling his name, but then he walks into, the other room where his wife is talking to the realtor, and he may be like, honey, did you call my name? And she'll be like, no, I was talking to the realtor, and stuff like that. That is possible. These are phenomenon where you can probably very easily conclude that a house is haunted by a conscious entity that is already starting to fuck with you. So basically, these are very early warning signs. Now, later on, should you decide to purchase such a place or rent such a place, over time you will start to experience an increased feeling of unease, an increased feeling of irritation, of unrest, of negative feelings, likely towards your spouse and or your children. You will start experiencing all sorts of negative thoughts that are over time, they seem to become more like you.